She won most talkative in high school, and she has been running her mouth ever since. Welcome to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast with your host, Lisa Fisher.
Okay, I hope my listeners are sitting down because I have the first lady of fasting here. I call Dr. Fung the father of fasting. I call Jen Stevens the mother of intermittent fasting. So I thought, where does Megan fit in? I thought she's the first lady. Okay, your new book is out. By the time this drops, your new book is out. And let's talk, not bury the lead. Tell me about your new book.
It's been a wild ride. Jason Fung's obviously written several books. I co-authored the bestseller Life in the Fasting Lane with him, but I've been very involved. We've been partners since the start. We co-founded all of this together. So I've definitely played a role in his books. So the publisher just came to me and, he said, "You've got all this information. We don't even know where to start, but we need to start somewhere, capturing it and putting it down." And as a woman myself who does this and who works with women of all ages, 18 years old, PCOS, never had a period, 92 years old, wanting to live forever, lose a bit of weight, and most women, looking just to thrive in their retirement years. That's primarily who we've seen. And there's all these weird myths and misconceptions out there. And it's just kind of wild because fasting's not only has it given me my life back, it's enabled me to now be on this motherhood journey when I was told it wouldn't be possible. But every single day for the last 12 years, I've seen it give a woman back her life. Whether, they're 65, postmenopausal, diabetic and needing to lose 100 pounds, or, their kids are now a bit older, they're approaching perimenopause, they never quite kicked that gestational diabetes or lost that weight. Every day, a woman gets her life back through fasting. So all of these myths and misconceptions over the years just bothered me. People would always forward me these articles or these tweets, and I would look at the authors and none of them had experienced fasting, anybody. And then there was me, who's working with patients from sunrise to sunset and beyond, and seeing the opposite. And I'm well aware that, the 10, 15 year randomized control trials are not totally there yet. But clinically, we're seeing it. And if you think back to how we evolved, we had to have fasted. It was our only option for most of human history. And then just, again, every day. So I said, I really wanted to tackle the whole subject of women, not just speaking to young women in my age demographic, but speaking to the demographic that I've largely worked with, this, perimenopausal to postmenopausal phase. As a woman, I just remember all my grandmothers and my great aunts and everyone telling me how doomed I was going to be as I got older. And I'm seeing women thrive every single day, and we can totally thrive with the right lifestyle tools. So it came from that passion and that discussion, how this book just became to be.
I would say for me in my journey, it was 2017. I was already postmenopausal, but as I hit I'm 60 now. As I hit 40, I'd gained about 15 pounds. And I now think that's what they're calling thyropause. I think my thyroid was starting to burn out and I was perimenopausal because I was doing the nighttime wakenings, but I couldn't really get anyone to listen to me. I did finally find a provider who would do the type of thyroid hormone replacement, bioidentical, with Armour thyroid. But I still didn't lose the weight. I still had these 15 pounds that was on me that burdened me every day. And at 2017, when I was introduced to Jen Stevens' book, and then one of the early books by Dr. Fung. So that was before Life in the Fasting Lane, because I love Life in the Fasting Lane. But 17, maybe it was the Obesity Code or the Complete Guide to Fasting. Those were a little sciencey for me. So I got them on Audible and it helped it. And the light bulb went off and I stomped my foot, Megan, and thought, I've been lied to. I was told to eat less and exercise more. Mm-hmm. And every time I attempted that, all I did was I was hungry all the time, which now I'm not hungry until it's time to be hungry. And I did not lose weight. In fact, I would gain weight. If I had a period, I would do a 90-day cardio challenge and I would do an hour every day. And in 90 days, I would gain 4 pounds. And people go, well, it's probably muscle. I'd go, it's not muscle. I've gained weight. So this is such an important message to my community because I'm now a certified health coach. And my client this morning, who's my age, just said, I'm 60, but I hate it. It's not a great time. And I said, I'm sorry you feel that way because I promise you there is light at the end of this tunnel and it is fabulous. So it's such a great message, Megan, that you are encouraging women. Now, the contraindication or the caveat we do say about pregnancy, I mean, intermittent fasting is no pregnant women should fast, right? No teenagers should fast, no former eating disorder if you haven't recovered from an eating disorder, or nursing moms. Is that still the scientific perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pregnant now, and I shared a lot of my fertility journey through my social media channels. We did embryo banking. So I think a lot of people think I had infertility issues. I didn't, but because I had PCOS when I was younger, I just burned through all my follicles. So now, I'm healthy. There's no reason why I can't get pregnant, but my ovarian reserves are a little bit low. So I'm going to be 39 probably by the time this podcast airs.
Oh, okay.
And, so when I have baby number 2, I'm going to be in my 40s. So we didn't know if I would have eggs left. So we did embryo banking and got a few future babies lined up in the freezer. Okay. So I've shared all of this, and I've had literally thousands of women reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook. They just found out they're pregnant, but they haven't lost their weight yet. And, my heart breaks for you, but you can eat really well when you're pregnant. I mean, we were chatting a bit before this recording, and the first trimester can be really rough. I experienced that too. So you've got to do what you've got to do. But throughout when you start to have better days, I'm having some better days, just eating really well. And you don't need to eat from sunrise to sunset. You might need to when the nausea is a little bit rough, eat a little bit more often. But you can still get in great nutrients diet. And I've actually heard from a lot of women that they still, they only gained healthy weight during their pregnancy and just focusing on real whole foods. And the same thing when you are nursing. A lot of women, they don't hit their goals before they get pregnant, then they gain the weight. You're going to burn so much through nursing, and you need the nutrients. But once you stop nursing, usually we like to wait about 6 to 12 weeks after someone stopped breastfeeding to fast, just to let some of the hormones settle down and recalibrate. I know not breastfeeding, not every woman can, or nor is it for them. So about the same thing, 6 to 12 weeks after delivering. If you're not going to be breastfeeding, then we'll start with the fasting up again.
Okay, great. I've never known a definition or kind of qualifications of that. I'm glad you were able to line that up. Okay, let's talk about some of the things about fasting, because I followed you for so long and listened to your podcast and, of course, know about your reputation. And one thing I know about you, Megan, is you don't like the term window. And that's all we use in the fasting world is about our feasting window, and fasting window. But what do you like to call it then?
We just like to go back to meals, like the leave it to Beaver style days. So I guess one of the ways that I differ from other women in fasting is that I tend to work with a more metabolically challenged population in general. And I think that's tied to my work with Jason and him being the diabetes guy. Right. So we tend to have a bit more complicated metabolic insulin resistant individuals we work for. And I think that's primarily how my book differs from other books on women and fasting. If you can lose weight with, some time restricted eating, and you can eat for 8 hours on your eating days and lose 70 pounds, that's great. If you've got more metabolic challenges though, though, that doesn't always work, because people who have insulin resistance, they have these toxic levels of insulin in their body, and that's perpetuating the disease. And we develop insulin resistance through various pathways, but one of them is a chronic stimulus of insulin, and people don't realize that. Even at low levels, but if chronically produced, we can cause insulin resistance. And if you already have insulin resistance, it's just worsening it. So we like to go back to the old school, how grandparents and great grandparents grew up, the leave it to Beaver style, we call it, just those 3 meals a day. I've been sharing this a lot in our community as people have a lot of anxiety going into summer vacations and family visiting. My husband gained 20 pounds in COVID, like so many people did. He actually gained most of it going back into office and just sort of recalibrating. And then, of course, the guy doesn't try to lose weight till I get pregnant. Now he's on the right weight loss ball. So he's been doing some really awesome fasting. Super proud of him. And then we recently went away for a baby moon. And I'm eating 3 times a day, not elaborate meals, but I'm eating. And so he was joining me and he was terrified. He's like, oh, I've just lost all this weight, blah, blah, blah. Well, he lost 2 pounds that week because we were just eating meals. We weren't eating late at night. There was no snacking or grazing when we were being active. When we weren't napping, we were being active. Right. And he lost weight. Yeah. And I used to see it when we had the clinic in Toronto every January. Patients would not want to get any measurements done. They wouldn't want to get any lab work done because they just had, the month of December of eating. But our patients have been so trained to not snack, to eat meals, to, eat before they go to a party so they don't graze for hours, or set a timer when they get to a party so they have a mini meal out of hors d'oeuvres and appetizers, but to not snack or graze. And so every January, these patients who expected to be up 10 pounds were down a couple of pounds. Right. If they thought their labs were going to be worse, they were the same or they were better. So the power of minimizing the number of times you raise your insulin levels even a little bit throughout the day is pretty significant. Most of the people that come to our program, they've been doing great on whatever real food strategies they're doing. And they've lost 50 of the 80 pounds. Or, they were on 5 diabetic medications, cardiac medications. They're off of all of that and they've got an A1C of 6. But why can't they optimize things? Are they so broken they can't lose the last 30 pounds? Are they too broken they can't get their A1C to 5? And literally with them, we just minimize the number of times a day that we're spiking insulin or producing insulin. Okay. And suddenly 30 pounds comes off. Yeah, and so we're really big on just meals and getting rid of windows and snacking and grazing. One of the biggest pitfalls I see for people when they reach maintenance is they go back to that grazing lifestyle, a handful of nuts, a piece of cheese, some vegetables, hummus, whatever diets they follow. And then, 6 months down the road, the weight's starting to creep up 5 pounds and they're worried about the snowball effect. So that's one of the things that we really try to instill a lot in our community is, let's get back to the basics, and my grandmother was my only advocate when I first started fasting. Everyone thought I had an eating disorder in my family. And she said, none of us got obese and none of us got sick till the potato chips and the cookies were in the house all of the time. Your dad didn't go to a school with a pail full of snacks like you did. He was lucky if he got an apple. And if he was bad, I wouldn't even give him an apple that day. Just going back to those basic principles of how we live throughout a lot of even modern day human history.
Well, kids now show up to kindergarten at 7:45 in the morning with a Starbucks this big that they sip on all day. That insulin is hovering, to the ceiling. And the parents will say, but it was low fat or it was sugar free or whatever. And we now know about, well, part of that is also we know the flavors with the cephalic response, which is a fascinating study. Why don't you kind of address the cephalic response? And that's why Diet Coke can be detrimental when you're fasting.
Well, so I mean, a Diet Coke and sweeteners, natural or artificial, we do still see them raise insulin levels, even in the absence of glucose levels being up. But in general, that, sort of pre-digestive response, when we think about food, when we see food, when we're
Yes.
cooking and preparing food,
Yes.
when we're having something like a Diet Coke, we do produce insulin in response to that. It does trigger appetite, but it produces insulin. So we actually talk a lot about mindful eating strategies in our community, because there's a big difference between sitting down and being at like your kitchen island or dining room table with no phones or distractions, and having your meal and paying attention to your meal, versus, sitting down at your desk, eating while answering 5 emails, having YouTube videos going on in the background, like you're trying to learn your new word working skill or something at the same time. We have very different nervous system responses too to these particular foods. But we do have like this pre-digestive response. So we'll start to produce digestive juices in response to certain stimulus. And insulin is produced during this particular response. There's sometimes we have to be a little bit cautious, because people really lean into what we say like it's the golden rule. And, if you chew ice, you're going to have an insulin response. There is going to be that cephalic digestive response to chewing ice.
Is that right?
Yeah, just chewing or gum. So
I knew gum because it had a sweetener in it, but I didn't realize even chewing ice, because it tells the brain you're about to have a meal, or whatever it is, for your pancreas to release the insulin to usher glucose to the cells. Okay. Makes sense.
You see a colleague eating lunch, you hear someone crunching on something. So, we try to be conscientious of how we share this. We want to minimize our insulin responses on our fasting days, but you can't get rid of them entirely on your fasting days. But in terms of responses and hormonal responses we have in the body, that nervous system response plays a big role. I think everybody's familiar with the flight or fight or the rest and digest concepts out there. So we have our sympathetic nervous system, which is the flight or fight nervous system. And when we're in that state, our body's producing glucose, it's storing fat, it's pumping out insulin to help store fat. We're not absorbing nutrients. We're actually taking metabolic energy and redirecting it elsewhere for our survival, taking it away from things like digestion and fertility. So when we eat, when we're sort of even multi-distracted, we're going to have so much more of an intensive insulin response, be so much more able to store and to trap body fat. And we're not going to absorb our nutrients as much, versus if you're in that rest and digest state, you're going to minimize glucose, minimize insulin, minimize fat storage, and improve absorption of nutrients. So there's a ton of data that goes to show that if you are sitting down at your kitchen table having, dinner, even if you're engaging in light social conversation, that's fine, but you absorb about 60% more nutrients from the foods you eat than if you were to eat at your desk while trying to answer emails or you're scrolling on social media. So all of these different things that we don't think about, from, sipping on the can of soda to eating at our desk and answering emails, there's a lot of our behavioral activities that can cause this insulin response and sort of lead to these hormonal imbalances or cascades of hormonal imbalances.
Okay. Another group of people that I deal with is, and I know you do too, and I want to know, this is, not everyone has the wild success that maybe you had or I had or Jen Stevens had. I have a lot of clients who, though they've lost maybe 100 pounds and they have 150, they need another 50 to lose, they're stuck. I have a lot who have immediate success, but then they say they get stuck. What are some of your hacks that you have to help someone overcome that?
Yeah, so I mean, you can always try fasting longer. And Jason's famous for saying, "We'll just do a 5-day fast
Yeah.
and make it go away." No, that's not possible for everybody, nor do they want to do that. So on their eating days, we look for things that we can do to help optimize things. So are you snacking? Are you, letting yourself eat for these big windows, or have you gone down to meals? A lot of the time, I find that women in particular, we're busy. I know it's 2023. I have what I consider to be a very modern marriage. And because I work from home now and my husband doesn't, like 70% of the household stuff still somehow falls on me. And that's just the way it is. And I get it. But women today are doing just as much. We are busy, and my heart breaks. Like, I have a very helpful husband, and I only have 2 dogs that are lazy as can be, and I don't have this baby yet, and it's a rush. Making meals is like just so draining. We always joke, the minute we win the lottery, we're like hiring a personal chef. That's
real.
our
Yeah.
number one. So a lot of women, they're on the go. I've got some patients and clients we work with, they have 4 kids, ranging from 8 to 18. And so what I find is, because they're so on the go, they end up substituting meals for things like handfuls of nuts and blocks of cheese.
Okay.
And so instead of having side dishes, with their meals, they're having like 2 cups of nuts instead. End up taking in a little bit more carbs, a little bit excess protein that gets converted to glucose. A little bit more excess protein that converts to glucose. So, we try to work with them on their meal structure. If nuts and dairy are part of your routine, okay, let's make them more garnishes rather than side dishes, and try to focus on those. And so usually I'll ask, someone to keep a food diary. And I know they always get flustered. No one wants to do it because of the old calorie counting,
diet mentality.
days.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the times too, I have to let them know it's not because I think you've got all these secret hidden carbs in your diet. I don't think you're, there's a ton of ice cream or anything going on, but what are we using to fill up on? Because even in real foods, we can get into some imbalances with those. A lot of the times too, I find women really can either skip on protein or fat. So we'll work on addressing that. Protein's actually hard to get in to the diet. Even as a pregnant woman, I am so on top of it because it's absolutely critical, especially in this second trimester that I'm in. And it is tough. Like, every day I'm being I have to be really diligent and mindful to get in my, good, I'm 5'2", so I'm aiming to get 120 grams of protein a day. It's a lot of work.
I remember how challenging it was, especially being nauseated. I remember my husband putting a chicken breast in front of me, and I thought, I would rather die right now than to have to eat that. So I definitely, I ache with you.
But so many women do, for various reasons. Recently we had a person, and she emailed me, and she's like, oh my gosh, I thought this assignment was just totally useless. I was so annoyed you wanted me to do this. And she said, I'm getting in 35 to 45 grams of protein a day on my eating day. Like, no wonder my thyroid's struggling. No wonder my hair is struggling. I have cravings. And she's like, I would have totally bet I was getting 80 to 100 grams of protein a day. And so, we want to make sure that we're addressing any types of major deficiencies in order to help someone lose weight, especially women. So we'll do more of a deeper dive into these different nutritional aspects too. And often that can help get the ball rolling with the lack of, fast, without having to do much more aggressive fasting.
So for a long time, I thought maybe postmenopausal women, but even my younger clients, weren't eating enough. But I think now, Megan, the way you're saying it, they're not getting enough protein when they eat.
I find that's a big problem for a lot of women. It's rare. Like 1 out of 10 women I work with are getting sufficient protein and sufficient fat in their diet. It's something we have to work towards doing. And we want to get it from real whole food sources too.
Sure.
We don't want to necessarily be leaning into supplements. I understand why there's a market for it because it is challenging. But with some creative ways, you can definitely you get it in a cup of bone broth with a scoop of grass-fed collagen. It's a good 25 grams of protein right there. So helping the clients and patients to get creative with these ways. My husband just couldn't see how at lunch he could get 60 grams of protein and broth, collagen. We do eat certain types of dairy, so the goat and sheep. So, some sheep yogurt, adding in some nuts and seeds. And then suddenly, of course, he'll have some grass-fed beef. And the next thing he's at, 70 grams of protein for that meal.
Yeah.
So working with clients to help them find easy and sustainable ways to get it in through real food nutrition.
We can't have a discussion in 2023 without talking about the elephant in the room, and that's the GLP-1 agonist, the glucagon-like peptide agonist. And we're talking about Ozempic, Mounjaro, anything in that classification of drugs. I have said that it has hurt my business because now clients who were going to come back or had been meeting with me or considered meeting with me said, I'm just going to go get on Wegovy. Yeah. I'm like, that it doesn't pain me for me. It pains me for them. The risk of it has a black box warning of thyroid cancer. You're on it forever. But and I do think it's probably a great adjunct for some people. I absolutely understand that some people with type 2 diabetes have to get their insulin down. This is a way to do it. But tell me your position on the GLP-1 agonists.
Yeah, okay. This is a very popular question as of late. And I feel like most of the population out there thinks these meds just came out like yesterday. I mean, they've been in clinical practice for several years. It's just funny because now there's all this hype and this hoopla about it. And honestly, Lisa, if I had like a nickel for every person who came to me every day and say, I must be the one person this doesn't work for because I've lost no weight, nothing has changed. Like if I had a nickel for every person, even just this calendar year that has said that to me, I mean, we would all be living on our own island. The whole fasting community would come together
with our own chefs.
Yeah, none of us would have to work again. Like everyone listening. So there's. It's not the be all and the end all. In general, as an acute short-term use diabetic medication, I think it has some benefits. It does cause the body to produce more insulin. That's one of the mechanisms and how it works.
So the GLP-1 agonists produce more insulin?
Yeah, they cause the pancreas to secrete more insulin. It's not the only mechanism. They're not like sulfonylureas like glycoside, where their primary mechanism is for to nudge the pancreas to produce more insulin, but they do trigger the pancreas to produce more insulin.
That's not what we want.
No, that's not what you want. And if you're a diabetic who's got this long history of type 2 diabetes, so we see these really unfortunate cases where there's zero pancreatic output in these type 2 diabetics. Yeah. There's no autoimmune conditions at all. Their pancreas has just been so burnt out through the eating habits. It is just burned out. It can't produce insulin. So they look like a type 1 diabetic. There was 2 patients in our clinic in Toronto that we had to put on insulin like a type 1 diabetic. Because of this. So I always tell people, you got to think of your pancreas as a tire, right? If you're, and you got to treat it like it's on the most expensive car. It's your body. So, if you've got this fancy Bentley, Rolls Royce, Lamborghini, whatever your dream car is, you need to think of your body like that. Are you going to be driving it that hard, back and forth across the country, across the continent? Like, you're not going to do that. And if you did that, you would burn it out. You'd burn those tires. You'd have it would cause problems. That's what we do to our pancreases, following the standard North American diet and dietary advice. And it gets worse. The more diabetic you get, the worse the diet recommendations get.
It's criminal what they're told.
Yeah,
to increase their whole grains, to eat 7 or 20 times a day, whatever their stupid advice is. I shake my head, and I'm sorry that that's the only advice that those people are getting.
No, it's absolutely terrible. So they're burning out their pancreases. So I don't like patients going on sulfonylureas. It's just short term, maybe if they need it for crazy reasons, And so that's not these like the Ozempics of the world. That's not their primary mechanism, but that's what they do okay. That. So COVID hit. My family is in Canada. I'm originally from Toronto. I'm only new to the Bay Area. So Canada had some pretty intense lockdown situations.
Bad.
I think we learned, the whole world heard about Canada.
Yes.
So, it got pretty depressing there for a lot of people. I was there
sure.
for the first year, and then we up and we left because we were done with it. So it was depressing. And Jason called me one day and he's like, Megan, your dad's blood sugars are going back up. I talked to him. He's really struggling, like so many people are right now. I told him I need to give him something for 3 months. 3 months, he's got to figure out this COVID life. And I knew my dad would. I had full faith that my father would figure this out. So I said, okay, put him on Ozempic for 3 months, just to help, because it is good for the blood sugars. It does help cut a little bit of the appetite. So I thought it might give my dad a tiny bit of the edge. It doesn't do that for everybody, but you still have to have the right behaviors and mindset and motivation. And I knew my dad, after a few weeks of this, he was going to feel pretty awful and he was going to get back into doing things. And that's what happened. Now it's been 2 years and he hasn't taken it and he's doing just fine.
Great.
So for a short-term intervention, sure, some people do find it takes the edge off their appetite. But unless you learn what to eat, when to eat, how to eat, and address, any self-sabotaging mindset behaviors that you have with food, it doesn't matter. It's not going to take the edge off of anybody doing anything. If you use food like it's your best friend, you hang out with it, you celebrate with it, you strike boredom with it. It's those things don't get changed by a miracle injection. There's no such thing. So I think it's totally crazy. Some of these celebrities too, a couple of them are clients of mine, and I understand that people need to be careful about fasting. Still controversial, especially females who are role models to younger children. There's a lot of controversy. So I understand people not wanting to blast this, across their social media profiles. But some of them are working so hard at nutrition and fasting. And because they're getting such great results, they're just being blasted as these Ozempic celebrities.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not even taking it in the first place. And half the people that have come forward who are more celebrities, so it didn't do anything for me. Elon Musk, it didn't do anything for me. So anyways, it's like everything else in life. You have to put in the time, the effort, the elbow grease. You have to make changes and adjust if you want to get real sustainable results.
And listen to your body. I always tell my clients, your body doesn't whisper, it really shouts. Is you're so busy eating, you can't hear it. So, but the fact, Megan, that Jason Fung gets your medical advice for your father is probably the highest honor one could. It is equivalent to knighthood in the UK. So congratulations.
He is my dad. I wouldn't be his primary care, but.
Well, I think it's sweet. Okay. I heard an Instagram highfalutin person today, influencer, say they called Berberine nature's Ozempic. And I thought that is a great way to word that, to let people know that it's, in fact, there's a gal in my town who uses it for longevity, anti-aging, all the things that are benefits of it. So let's talk about Berberine's role. It's the over-the-counter version, if you want to say, of metformin, which is a diabetic drug. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, it works just like metformin at helping to reduce blood sugar levels as a similar mechanism of function in the liver, but it's got other wonderful benefits to it too, not just from blood sugar. So anti-aging, disease prevention. I had a client this morning who's got some like, if you've got the bad genes for cardiovascular disease, she won the lottery. She got every single one.
Wow.
So through nutrition and lifestyle, she's trying to suppress the expression of them. And the only intervention she's actually implemented in the last 3 months was berberine. And she's seen her lipo protein A come down, her ApoB come down, the ratio of them both improve. Like these markers that they told her would only improve on a ton of statins and those new injectable medications. And that was the only thing she's changed. She had some good preliminary results with some niacin, and then adding in the berberine has made a huge impact. So I think if you can tolerate it, you absolutely should take it. I mean, everybody can have, I cannot tolerate berberine, but I will recommend everybody try it. And
does it give you nausea and all, like Mounjaro or Ozempic would?
It gives me a ton of nausea. And I was actually talking to James Nicolantonio and some other friends about it. And they thought, perhaps I had a bit of thiamine deficiency issues.
Right.
So after pregnancy and whatnot and getting my micronutrient levels checked, I will take it. I do think that they were right, the thiamine deficient issues, because I had delayed, I would get those really bad muscle cramps, everybody, after you work out for days. So the lactic
do you have
acid,
Hashimoto's?
No, I don't.
Okay, because that's a common component that Isabella Wentz talks about, is the thiamine deficiency with it.
So, I did prior to pregnancy, prior to trying to get pregnant, drink quite a bit of green tea. So James is like, you're just depleting yourself through nutritional means.
That worked against you.
We think
because that helps sometimes in adrenal fatigue, which is also a thyroid patient. Thus what I am. So I kind of, know my stuff on this stuff. So that's interesting that the green tea can work against you in that instance.
I was taking several cups a day. I'm on the West Coast, working East Coast hours primarily.
Yeah.
So I will say I was abusing it. But we did start our conception journey shortly after I got that sorted out. So after baby, I will try berberine again. So I do think it's got a ton of benefits. It's great. There's a lot of holistic things that you can use in lieu of a lot of these pharmaceuticals and get better results and only have additional benefits rather than potential side effects of of them as well. So berberine's a really great one. Inositol is another really popular one.
Right. I love inositol. Yeah. I like it for sleep and rest, and that's my benefit. One of the things what I like about it, I have berberine, but I just forget to take it. So tell me, here I am preaching to people, you need to take berberine, but it's just one of those things I forget. Am I taking it before the meal or after the meal, with the meal?
Usually with the meal or right before the meal is when it's supposed to be the most effective. If you really forgot and took it right after the meal, I don't think it would make that much of a difference either. But we'll usually tell people, when your food, your meal is almost ready, have your berberine, have whatever else you're going to take, and then, sit down and have your meal.
Now, another thing you and Dr. Nadia talk about on your podcast, and I will put all this in the show notes, of course, about the book and everything in the show notes. And one thing you talk about are the rolling 42s and a strategy to really help, because a lot of people do get stuck, right, with their weight loss. And my clients, I know, breathe into a paper bag when I want them to go to a 20-and-4 type eating schedule, not windows, just trying to cut down their hours. But then when I say, well, you need to listen to Megan Ramos and the rolling 42s are like, I can't do it. So explain that and explain how it's so effective and what it's really doing for, if you're not losing weight, you're insulin resistant.
So when you have insulin resistance, the data really shows, and clinically the results show that the insulin doesn't even really start to drop down to a point where you can access body fat stores until about 20 to 24 hours into a fast, which is where so many people are cutting off their fasting time. So, if we are struggling with a lot of insulin toxicity, we need to get those levels low enough. I always joke, like, each of these little insulin molecules, they're like bodyguards for the body fat, protecting the body fat. And we've got to fast through to obliterate enough of them so we can go to town and attack our body fat. So we've got to get rid of the insulin as much as possible. So most of the people that we serve in our community do have this toxic level of insulin, and we're just starting to make headway at 24 hours. So, I mean, we can chip away at it and just do 24 hours and really chip away at it. But most people want to bulldoze it, or at least go at it with a hammer. And that's why we want to stay in that 24, like we want to stay in the fast once we get to that 24-hour mark, to actively be able to burn the body fat and also to suppress the insulin for a long enough period of time. Once we have insulin resistance, our cells are literally resistant to our insulin. And it's true that absence makes the heart grow fonder, not just in relationships or with TV
Right.
shows or whatnot, but like at a cellular level too. So giving that sustained break really boosts insulin sensitivity. So we know when Jason and I started, we encouraged everyone to fast for a day and then eat 3 meals the following day. Fast for a day, eat 3 meals. And the math of that works out to be about 36 hours. But a lot of the patients came back to us and they're like, if we can just get through the night, we can keep on going. It's
True.
really sort of that end of the day window, when the hunger hormones can sometimes be boosted a bit because, well, we're used to eating at 6 or 7 p.m. and our insulin goes up a bit at night. But then a lot of them say, we wake up, we're not hungry, and our blood sugar levels are already elevated in the morning. If our blood sugar is going up, what we've learned from you all is that our insulin must be going up too, and we're not even eating. So why eat? Like, let's burn down our glucose and not add fuel to the fire. So our own patients coerced us into doing what we call the 42-hour fast, where they would just have lunch and dinner on their eating days. Now, back in our old school days, we just turned 12 years old this week. So back then, most of our patients were retired. It was Toronto. It was a winter time, or we would have winter. So it was not always social all year round for a lot of these patients. And they could do true alternate days. Fast one day, eat, fast one day, eat. But as we've shifted into non-winter time zones, or people who have families that are active on the weekends. We really encourage people to try to do 3 of these fasts a week from 24 to 42 hours, just so we can do fasts that you can chip away at them, but we can also go at it with a sledgehammer, a bit of a bulldozer, and get the insulin down long enough so we can burn a good amount of body fat, suppress the insulin long enough, generate more insulin sensitivity. And we don't do this forever. I reversed type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, PCOS, and I lost over 60 pounds in 6 months. And, I did a combination of 24 to 42 3 times a week. And it worked really well. And I could vary it depending on my schedule. If I didn't feel well one week, I could do 3 24s. If I had some social events, I could do 3 24s, or I could mix them up. And if I felt great, I could do 3 42s. And I just stayed consistent with it. And I was able to hit my goals. And then, I typically follow a two meal a day strategy with the occasional longer fast here and there, and until baby. And now I'm doing like 12, 14 hours of fasting with my meals, with baby on board. So, there's, and I maintained, until pregnancy, I actually lost an additional 20 pounds. I was down 83 pounds total, and I maintained that weight loss for over a decade before getting pregnant.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah.
That is such a help to all your organs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people don't understand. Our organ health really has so much to do with our overall health, and it's taxed. I mean, Dr. Bickman has explained that so well, and why we get sick is that what it does, insulin resistance does to all the organs, and your ability to conceive. That's tremendous, and I'm so happy for you. Well, now at one time, Dr. Fung, and you both, I don't know if you said it too, but, and you mentioned it there, Megan, that you would have kind of a refeed day because that's how we upregulate our metabolism. But then I heard him recently, maybe, I don't know if his tone changed, but I felt like he wasn't saying to do a whole lot more. I just came off a 3-day fast. Oh, we're recording this on Friday, so I didn't eat Monday at 6 p.m. I put my fork down. I didn't eat. I actually started at 4 p.m. yesterday to get my digestive juices going. I had some bone broth and watermelon so that I wouldn't get sick when I did eat at 6 p.m. So I was 2 hours shy of actually 3 days. So I ate last night. Well, I do have very, my satiety levels are extremely sensitive, my cholecystokinin and YY peptide and all that because of the way I eat. I eat a high fat, diet. But this morning I woke up and I didn't have breakfast, but I almost wanted it. Not that I don't think it's good or bad, but I just thought, why am I hungry? I just went 3 days without food, and I ate lunch today at 11 o'clock, which I typically don't do, but had a real high fat meal, and I'm fine now. So, and I am planning on eating a dinner tonight. So is this part of my refeed, or is this just, I don't feel like I'm overeating. I'm just making sure that I'm satisfied, not skimping. Is that the philosophy?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think actually one of our most hated blog posts, Jason's written all these favorite blog posts, was he was like really giving a lot of grief to these like bulletproof coffees and teas and fat bombs. Yeah. And I will tell you, in all of the 1,000 blog posts he's written and all of the books that he's written, he's never written anything that's angered people more. Like, we got like almost 500,000 emails about I'm not even joking. It was mayhem. We still get emails about it because he refuses to take down the blog post. And so I know we all kind of struggle, him and myself and the rest of the team, about, we don't want people to shy away from fat, but you can't totally slather it on everything. I was working with someone recently who was literally eating mayo with a spoon just to like eat fat because she thought it was helping. And so we don't want to be doing that. Or, my husband's trying to lose weight, and the other day he put a ton of butter on his steak. And I was like, okay, don't, like, better. You used to work with us, like, you stop it. So it's about eating to satiation. If we were working, like Jason and I, we had this one patient who was like 88 pounds. She's like 5'1", and she was a type 2 diabetic. Her body composition was awful.
Even though she was thin.
Yeah, she had a terrible fatty liver. She had all kinds of visceral fat. So, that she had weak and brittle bones, sarcopenia. Yeah. So she needed to put on some good weight and lose the bad weight at the same time. So for her, have the bulletproof stuff, slobber on the mayo and the butter on everything, eat a bit beyond satiation from time to time. But we really want to be eating fat to satiation, but not beyond, and not eating it for the heck of it. And this is something I know he struggles, I struggle, the rest of our team struggles with trying to convey, and, not be told we're anti-fat. We're not, I love it. As a pregnant woman who's growing life and whose team is after her for not really gaining weight, baby's growing fine. Like I'll drizzle olive oil on an avocado, for example. But if you're trying to lose weight, then, be mindful of what you do with the butter and that type of stuff.
All right. Max Lugavere just recently had someone on. I wasn't familiar with him, but he kind of threw a wrench into what I've always said, or I felt like Jen has said it, you've said it, or Jason. And that is to mix it up with your fasting and feasting schedule. So, you might have breakfast tomorrow, breakfast and lunch. You might skip a day, and then the next day have dinner. Well, he was acting like he was trying to convey, I think, with circadian rhythms, that you needed some type of schedule because your body maybe depends on it. What's your philosophy with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when people are actively trying to lose weight, the more variation, usually the better.
Okay.
You know, Jason will say sometimes on Saturday, have breakfast, really confuse the heck out of your body, mix it up. And we're constantly mixing it up with people, and even sometimes mixing up their dietary, strategies too, temporarily to shake things up. When people get to maintenance, though, we do talk more about hormonal regulation, circadian rhythm, and that, our metabolism really does run highest middle of the day. If you can have your bigger meal middle of the day, we sort of need to mix things up, like have lunch, dinner, and breakfast rather than breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In terms of food order, I don't really think you need to eat more than twice a day. Sometimes you're fine just eating once a day too. So, I mean, there is a little bit for that. Rarely is, if someone's adrenals, like if you're at the point where you can't, and I got to this point when I had mold toxicity, and you can't stand up to make tea. You can't stand up to pour yourself a glass of water.
Wow.
Your blood pressure is 74/43.
Yeah.
Then focusing on balancing your system, your circadian rhythm, supporting your cortisol, your adrenals, your thyroid hormones. Like there's a time and a place for that. But I mean, if you're not in that state of thyroid detriment or, adrenal detriment, then we find it only to be beneficial to mix things up. And then when you get into maintenance, you can focus on optimizing all of the other aspects of the circadian rhythm and health.
I remember in the beginning, or a few years when I first started in 2017, Jason would say, I like calling him Jason now, I've always called him Dr. Fung, but he would say to try to get your meals in before the sun sets, right? Mm-hmm. And depending on where you are on the globe, the sun, if you're in Europe, parts of Europe, the sun sets at about 3:15. In other parts, it doesn't set, right? So now the science is saying, well, on second thought, just have breakfast and lunch and let's skip dinner because you're most insulin sensitive in the morning and you're more insulin resistant at night. Is that still something you might say?
Yeah, definitely, especially to people who are sort of at their goals and looking to maintain good health. The sunrise and sunset. So I'm in the Bay Area, and we came here for my husband's job. I'm still learning the lay of the land. But we're going on something like the 10th week of like the sun not setting till like after 9 p.m. And we struggled with this in Toronto too, because this is a popular sentiment, eat before the sun sets. Well, in Toronto, it doesn't set till 9 p.m. for like half the year. And then the other half of the year, it sets at 3 p.m. So what are you supposed to do? In general, I encourage people, make sure you've got a good 4 hours between your last meal and going to bed. And if you can get in more, then that's that. I mean, sometimes you can't. And I get that. I respect you've got to do what you've got to do. My husband used to work at home, and we would have our big meal at lunchtime when we were eating, and we wouldn't really eat dinner. But now he doesn't work in the home anymore, and it is what it is in this household because we're not having dinner at lunch. And I don't have time to make lunch. So it varies per household. But yeah, if you can eat earlier in the day, when we've got retired clients that we work with, eating like sort of a brunch and an early dinner, like 9 and 3, trying to get that second meal in before about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's sort of optimal what we aim for with that population.
Okay. Well, your book, The Essential Guide for Intermittent Fasting for Women, is it out now? This will drop we're doing this just a few days before my podcast. We never do this, but you were such a special guest and I knew your book was dropping this week. Is it out yet?
Yes, it is. It's been wild. I really appreciate everybody's support. Thank you.
I will download it today. Is it on Audible yet?
No, I don't know when it's going to be. That's a big thorn I've got to figure out.
Okay. Well, I'll get it downloaded because I have them all and they're a part of my library, and it's why I'm in good health, why I've reversed 5 of my 6 autoimmune conditions. Even my GI doc said we were never designed to digest all day. I have a rare swallowing motility disorder, and I've reversed it. And I asked him what he thought it was. He said, my doctor said it's fasting. He said, because your esophagus needs a break. And that's why I said you're never designed to digest all day. And you need the break. I'm still working on my vitiligo, and I'm encouraged that every day, I get 1 inch closer to repigmenting my skin, and fasting has a lot to do with that. I do eat pretty much a meat-based diet, and I think that helps me, but we're all different. So thank you so much for being here. Great job.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you having me, and happy fasting to everyone listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe and download all the episodes and leave a review, won't you? The Lisa Fisher Said podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.